This whole game, Ethan. You were playing against yourself.
The red fluid on my knuckles wasn't mine. I stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror of the Middle Eastern safe house, watching crimson drops fall into the porcelain sink. 3 days of hunting insurgents through bombed-out buildings had left their mark. But it wasn't the enemy's crimson that bothered me. It was what I'd found on Samantha's phone. The message notification had popped up while I was using her phone to call my mother. Simple enough, my satellite phone was dead, and Sam always told me to use hers for family calls. But when I swiped to open the dialer, I saw it. "Can't wait to feel you again. E's deployment ends next month. We need to be careful." The sender's name made my stomach drop. Tuck. Travis Tucker. My best friend since basic training. My squad mate. The man who'd pulled me out of 2 firefights and shared his last MRE with me in Middle East. The man I'd trusted with my life for 8 years. The man who was sleeping with my wife. I set the phone down with hands steadier than they had any right to be. 20 years of military training kicked in. Assess, analyze, act. Never let emotion cloud judgment. But inside, something dark and cold was spreading through my chest like poison. The bathroom door creaked open. "Kane, you ready?" Tuck's voice carried that familiar Kentucky drawl. "Colonel wants us for debrief in 10. I turned around, studying his face. Same crooked smile, same easy confidence. No guilt in those brown eyes. No shame in the way he clapped my shoulder like he had 1,000 times before. "Yeah, I'm ready," I said. But I wasn't talking about the debrief. The next few hours passed in a blur of mission reports and tactical discussions. Colonel Ramirez praised our work. 17 insurgents neutralized, 3 weapons caches destroyed, 0 friendly casualties. A textbook operation. Tuck and I sat side by side in the briefing room, just like always. But everything had changed. I watched him laugh at Ramirez's jokes. Watched him clean his rifle with the same meticulous care he always showed. Watched him scroll through his phone during downtime, probably texting my wife. Planning their next rendezvous while I bled for my country. The betrayal cut deeper than any shrapnel I'd ever taken. That night, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling. Around me, the rest of the squad snored and shifted in their sleep. Tuck was 3 beds down, dead to the world. I could walk over there right now, snap his neck before he even woke up, make it look like an accident during tomorrow's patrol. But that would be too easy, too quick. "Kane!" The whisper came from Ramirez, who'd appeared beside my bunk like a ghost. "Walk with me." We stepped outside into the cool Middle Eastern night. Stars stretched across the desert sky, unmarked by the violence below. Ramirez lit a cigarette and offered me one. I declined. "Your tour's up in 2 weeks," he said. "You planning to re-up?" "Haven't decided yet, sir." "Your wife's been asking. She called the base yesterday. Wanted to know when you'd be home." Seemed anxious. I bet she was. Probably worried I'd find out about her little arrangement before she could figure out how to handle it. "She misses me," I said. "That's good. A good woman is worth more than all the medals in the world." Ramirez took a long drag. "You know, I've got one more operation coming up. High-value target in a Middle Eastern ghost town about 50 clicks north. Could use my best team on it." "Tuck and me?" "Exactly. What do you say? One last ride together?" I looked up at those stars, each one cold and distant and perfect. "Yes, sir. Wouldn't miss it." Ramirez smiled and clapped my back. "Excellent. Briefings at 0600. Get some rest." But rest was the last thing on my mind. As I walked back to the barracks, my phone buzzed. Another message from Samantha, this time to me. "Missing you so much, baby. Can't wait for you to come home. Love you." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I typed back, "Love you too. See you soon." Then I deleted the message thread and started planning. The ghost town of Khalil stretched before us like a fever dream. Once home to 3,000 people, now it was nothing but hollow buildings and wind-carved silence. The perfect place for a high-value target to hide. The perfect place for other things, too. "Intel says he's holed up in the old school," Tuck said, adjusting his scope. We were positioned on a ridge overlooking the town, morning sun casting long shadows between the ruins. 3 tangos minimum, possibly more. I nodded, studying the terrain through my binoculars. Khalil was laid out in a grid pattern, Main Street running north-south, smaller roads branching off like veins, multiple escape routes, multiple opportunities. "Comms check," I said into my radio. Alpha base to Ghost Team. You're clear, came Ramirez's voice through the static. Remember, we need this guy alive. Intel only. Copy that, Tuck replied. I keyed my radio. Actually, sir, I'm reading some interference on Tuck's comm. Might want to switch to backup channel. Negative, Kane. Comms are clean on our end. Roger that, just being cautious. But caution wasn't what I was being. I was being smart. During pre-mission prep, I'd already identified a dead zone in Khalil's communication grid, an area where the mountains blocked satellite signals. All I had to do was get Tuck there. We moved out at 0800, approaching from the east. The plan was simple. I'd circle around back while Tuck provided overwatch from the school's second floor. Classic pincer movement. We'd done it 100 times, except this time I wasn't planning to come back. Movement, 2 o'clock, Tuck whispered into his radio as we reached the school's perimeter. I saw them too, 3 figures moving between buildings about 200 meters away. Our targets, exactly where Intel said they'd be. I'll take point, I said. You get to high ground. Watch yourself down there. Always do. Tuck squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that had once meant brotherhood, loyalty, trust. Now it just made my skin crawl. He jogged toward the school's back entrance while I moved deeper into the town. The next 30 minutes unfolded like clockwork. I tracked the tangos through abandoned shops and houses, feeding position updates to Tuck. He had clear shots on all 3 but held fire, waiting for my signal. Professional as always. Finally, I reached the dead zone. My radio crackled with static and went silent. Tuck, do you copy? I whispered into the mic. Nothing but white noise. Perfect. I doubled back through a maze of collapsed walls and debris piles, approaching the school from the north. Tuck would be on the second floor, focused on the targets below. He'd never see me coming. The school's interior was a tomb of dust and shadows. Broken desks littered the hallways, their wood bleached white by years of desert sun streaming through shattered windows. Children's drawings still clung to some walls, faded but visible. Smiling faces and bright colors from a world that no longer existed. I found Tuck exactly where I expected him, prone behind a window with his rifle trained on the street below. His backup radio sat beside him, crackling with Ramirez's voice. Ghost Team, report. Lost contact with Kane 5 minutes ago. Tuck keyed the radio. Still here, sir. Kane's in the dead zone, east side of town. Should have contact again in 10 minutes. Copy that. Maintain position. I watched him for a long moment. This man I'd considered a brother. This man who'd saved my life and was now destroying it. He looked so calm, so focused. Just doing his job like the professional he was. Like the professional I was, too. Moving silent as smoke, I approached from his blind spot. Military training is a beautiful thing. It teaches you exactly how to eliminate someone quietly and efficiently. But eliminating Tuck wasn't the plan. That would be too merciful. Instead, I disabled his primary radio with a small device I'd prepared, a signal jammer disguised as a battery pack. Then I switched his backup radio to a frequency that would pick up only static. Finally, I planted a small GPS tracker on his gear, one that would broadcast the wrong coordinates. When Ramirez tried to trace us later, it would look like Tuck had wandered off mission, gone rogue. Maybe defected to the enemy or simply deserted his post. Military tribunals had convicted soldiers for less. I was back in position within 20 minutes, my radio crackling to life as I left the dead zone. Ghost Team, this is Alpha Base. Sit rep. Kane here, I reported. Lost contact with Tuck about 15 minutes ago. His radio went dead right after I spotted the tangos moving toward the old mosque. Copy that. Can you reach his position? Negative. Too much open ground. I'll maintain surveillance on the targets. For the next 2 hours, I fed false information to base while methodically hunting down our actual targets, 3 insurgents, exactly as briefed. I took them alive, zip-tied, and ready for extraction. Then I keyed my radio. Alpha Base, target secured, but I've got a problem. Go ahead, Kane. Found Tuck's rifle and gear scattered near the mosque, signs of a struggle. Life fluid on the ground? The silence stretched for 10 seconds before Ramirez responded. Are you saying Tucker's been compromised? Looks that way, sir. Could be enemy contact, could be something else. Something else? I let my voice carry just the right amount of reluctance. Sir, Tuck's been acting strange lately. Secretive, and there's been talk about insurgents offering serious money for American intel. Another long pause. When Ramirez spoke again, his voice was granite. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm just reporting what I see, sir. Missing soldier, abandoned post, scattered gear. Could be anything. But we both knew what it looked like. In a war zone where loyalty could be bought and sold, where desperate men made desperate choices, Tuck's disappearance painted a very specific picture. An hour later, extraction arrived. I climbed into the helicopter alone, leaving behind a carefully constructed crime scene. Tuck's dog tags, crimson-streaked and hidden where search teams would eventually find them. His rifle, barrel filled with sand, to suggest it had been abandoned for days. His radio, smashed beyond repair. The evidence told a story. Travis Tucker had disappeared during a routine operation, possibly eliminated in action, possibly gone rogue. Without a body or witnesses, the truth would never be known. He'd become a ghost, erased from official records and buried in classified files. As the helicopter lifted off, I caught a glimpse of the school's second floor. A figure moved briefly across one of the windows. Tuck, probably wondering where the hell his backup had gone. By the time he worked up the courage to leave his position, I'd be long gone, and his radio would be broadcasting nothing but static. Let him walk home through 100 miles of hostile desert. Let him explain to his insurgent contacts why an American soldier was wandering around alone with no identification. Let him try to convince anyone that he wasn't exactly what he appeared to be, a traitor and a deserter. But most of all, let him disappear completely from Samantha's world. No goodbye calls, no final messages, no closure. Just empty silence where their love affair used to be. The first phase of my plan was complete. Now it was time to go home. Samantha was waiting at the airport with a smile that could have melted glaciers. She wore the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one that made her green eyes look like emeralds. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked like a woman who'd spent hours preparing to welcome home her beloved husband. She looked like a woman with something to hide. Ethan! She launched herself into my arms, and for a moment, muscle memory took over. I held her close, breathed in her familiar perfume, felt her heart beating against my chest. For just a second, I almost forgot what I knew. Then she pulled back and looked into my eyes, and I saw it. The flicker of guilt she couldn't quite suppress. I missed you so much, she whispered. Missed you too, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I'd missed the woman I thought she was. The drive home to Millbrook was 30 minutes of careful conversation. She asked about the mission, classified, my health, fine, when I'd be discharged, 2 weeks. I asked about her job, busy with state testing, her sister, still dating that loser, our neighbors, the Hendersons got divorced. Normal married couple talk, comfortable silences filled with country music from the radio. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed everything was exactly as it should be. But I did know better. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch. American dream in suburban form. I'd bought it with my signing bonus after my 3rd deployment, back when I still believed in happy endings. I kept your office exactly how you left it, Sam said, as we pulled into the driveway. Didn't move a single thing. That's sweet of you. Well, you know me. I respect a man's space. The irony was crushing. Inside, everything looked normal. Same furniture, same family photos on the mantel, same stack of bills on the kitchen counter. But I saw it all with new eyes now, looking for signs of the betrayal that had been happening under my roof. You hungry? Sam asked, already moving toward the kitchen. I made your favorite, pot roast with those little potatoes you like. Sounds perfect. I watched her cook, noting how she avoided my eyes whenever she thought I wasn't looking, how she kept checking her phone, how she jumped slightly when it buzzed with notifications, probably wondering why Tuck hadn't called her back yet. Dinner was a masterpiece of suburban theater. We talked about everything and nothing. Her students, my plans for civilian life, whether we should finally replace the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Sam played the devoted wife perfectly, asking all the right questions, laughing at my stories, reaching across the table to touch my hand. But I caught her staring at her phone when she thought I was focused on my food. Expecting a call? I asked casually. She startled. What? Oh no, just checking the time. I have some papers to grade tonight. On a Friday? State testing prep. You know how it is. I nodded like that made perfect sense, then excused myself to the bathroom. But instead of going upstairs, I slipped into the garage and retrieved a device I'd ordered online during my last week in Levant. a cell phone signal cloner, military-grade electronics, available to anyone with the right contacts and enough cash. It took 30 seconds to sync with Sam's phone from the kitchen. Now every call, text, and app notification would be mirrored to a burner phone in my pocket. Her digital life was officially under surveillance. The first intercepted message arrived at 11:47 p.m., just as we were getting ready for bed. "Where are you? Haven't heard from you in 3 days. Starting to worry." Sam was in the bathroom brushing her teeth when it came through. I watched her face through the mirror as she checked her phone, saw the confusion and growing concern. She typed back, "Don't know. Something must have happened." His phone goes straight to voicemail. The response was immediate. Maybe he's just being careful. He's back home now. I know, this is so hard. I hate lying to him. It won't be forever. We just need to figure out the right time. I set my burner phone aside and climbed into bed beside my wife, the woman who hated lying to me, the woman who was planning to leave me for my best friend as soon as they figured out the right time. "Everything okay?" I asked as she slid under the covers. "Just tired. Long day." "Yeah, me too." She curled up against my side, her head on my chest like she'd done 1,000 times before. In the darkness, I could feel her breathing gradually slow towards sleep. But every few minutes, she'd shift restlessly, and I knew she was thinking about Tuck, wondering where he was, worrying about their future together. Let her worry, because tomorrow, the real games would begin. The next 2 weeks fell into a comfortable routine that would have seemed perfectly normal to any outside observer. I spent my days handling discharge paperwork and settling back into civilian life. Sam went to work, came home, graded papers, watched TV with me in the evenings. A model military family adjusting to post-deployment life. But beneath the surface, I was conducting the most important reconnaissance mission of my career. Every morning after Sam left for school, I'd retreat to my home office, a converted bedroom on the second floor that she'd respectfully avoided during my deployment. She thought I was updating my resume and applying for civilian jobs. In reality, I was building a comprehensive intelligence file on my wife's affair. The cell phone cloning device had proven invaluable. Through her text messages, I learned that Sam and Tuck's relationship had started 8 months ago during a chance encounter at the grocery store. They'd been meeting twice a week at a motel outside town, always on Tuesday afternoons when Sam claimed to have faculty meetings, and Saturday mornings when she supposedly went jogging. I also learned about her accomplices. Her best friend Rachel knew everything. She'd been covering for Sam, providing alibis and even lending her car on occasions when they worried mine might be spotted at the motel. Rachel's messages were full of encouragement and romantic advice, treating my wife's infidelity like some kind of fairy tale romance. "You deserve to be happy," Rachel had texted. "Ethan's been gone so much, and Tuck really cares about you." "I just feel so guilty," Sam had replied. "We've been married for 12 years. Sometimes people grow apart." It's not anyone's fault. Apparently, 20 years of military service qualified as growing apart, but Rachel wasn't my only problem. Through careful surveillance, I discovered that Sam had confided in at least 3 other people: her sister Jenny, her coworker Michelle, and even our neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who'd apparently been providing strategic lookout services during Tuck's visits to our house. Our house, where he'd been sleeping in my bed, eating food I'd paid for, probably laughing about what a fool I was. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. On the surface, I played the role of oblivious husband perfectly. I asked Sam about her days, complimented her cooking, even suggested we plan a romantic weekend getaway to reconnect after my deployment. She agreed enthusiastically, probably already figuring out how to cancel so she could spend time looking for Tuck, because Tuck's continued silence was clearly eating at her. Her messages to Rachel became increasingly frantic. "It's been 2 weeks. Something's wrong. Maybe he's just processing things. You said he felt guilty about Ethan. He wouldn't just disappear, not without saying goodbye." "Oh, but he would." Because that's exactly what the official record showed. Travis Tucker, last seen during a classified operation in Levant, presumed dead or missing in action. No body recovered, no final communication, no closure for anyone who'd known him, including my wife. I began the next phase of my plan on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. Sam had left for work that morning with unusual excitement, probably hoping today would be the day Tuck finally made contact. Instead, she was about to receive some very different news. The first delivery arrived at Millbrook Elementary at 2:15 p.m., just as the school day was ending. A courier brought an official-looking envelope addressed to Mrs. Samantha Kane, marked personal and confidential. I watched from my car across the street as she signed for it in the school's main office. Through binoculars, I could see her hands shaking as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter on Department of Defense letterhead, carefully forged using templates I had acquired through military contacts. Dear Mrs. Kane, it is with deep regret that I must inform you of the disappearance of Staff Sergeant Travis Tucker during a classified operation in Levant. While SSG Tucker is currently listed as missing in action, I wanted to personally reach out given his close friendship with your husband. Your husband has requested that this information remain confidential pending the outcome of our investigation. Please accept my condolences during this difficult time. Sincerely, Colonel Maria Ramirez, Joint Task Force Operations. I watched Sam read the letter 3 times, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, devastating grief. She grabbed her desk for support, then sat down heavily in her chair. Her world had just collapsed, and she couldn't tell anyone why. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Sam couldn't grieve publicly without revealing her relationship with Tuck. She couldn't ask questions without raising suspicions. She couldn't even comfort herself by talking to Rachel or her sister, because explaining her devastation would mean confessing her betrayal. She was trapped in her own web of lies. I drove home and waited. Sam arrived at 6:30 p.m., 2 hours later than usual. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smeared. She'd clearly been crying in her car. Hey, babe, I said, looking up from my laptop. How was school? Fine, she managed. Just fine. You look upset. Everything okay? For a moment, I thought she might break, might confess everything and beg for forgiveness. Part of me almost hoped she would. It would have made the rest of this so much easier. Instead, she forced a smile. Just a long day. I think I'm coming down with something. Maybe you should rest. I can order pizza for dinner. That sounds good. She disappeared upstairs and I heard the bathroom door lock. Through my surveillance setup, I monitored her phone as she desperately tried calling Tuck's number. Straight to voicemail, exactly as I'd programmed it to do. She tried texting. Please call me. I need to know you're okay. I'm scared. Please, just let me know you're alive. I love you. Where are you? Each message disappeared into the digital void I'd created. That night, Sam lay awake beside me for hours. I could feel the tension radiating from her body, hear her stifled sobs when she thought I was sleeping. She was mourning the passing of her secret love, and she had to do it in complete silence. It was beautiful in its cruelty. But this was just the beginning, because tomorrow I was going to start destroying everything else she cared about. Phase 2 began with Rachel Morrison. Rachel lived in a suburban paradise 4 miles from our house. 2-story, brick colonial, perfectly manicured lawn, white picket fence around the backyard where her twin daughters played on a swing set. She'd been married to David Morrison for 15 years, a marriage built on trust, communication, and shared values, all of which made her betrayal of those values particularly satisfying to exploit. I'd been monitoring Rachel's communications along with Sam's, and what I'd discovered was illuminating. Rachel wasn't just covering for my wife, she was actively encouraging the affair, providing alibis, and even helping coordinate meetings. Dave's working late tonight, she'd texted Sam 3 weeks ago. You could bring Tuck here if you want privacy. Are you sure? What if the neighbors see? Back door through the garden. No one will know. So Rachel had invited my wife's lover into her family home, where her children lived and played, where her unsuspecting husband paid the mortgage and trusted his wife to honor their marriage vows. Time to return the favor. I spent 2 days conducting surveillance on the Morrison household, learning their routines. David left for his insurance office at 7:45 a.m. every morning. The twins caught the school bus at 8:15. Rachel worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, which gave her plenty of flexibility for covering Sam's affairs. On Thursday morning, I put my plan into motion. David Morrison was a creature of habit. Every morning at exactly 9:30 a.m., he stopped at Starbucks on 5th Street for a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He'd sit at the same corner table, check emails on his phone, and read the local paper for exactly 20 minutes before heading back to the office. I'd been watching him for a week. This morning, I approached his table with a manila envelope and a carefully rehearsed story. "Excuse me, are you David Morrison?" He looked up from his phone, mid-40s, thinning brown hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The sort of man who probably coached Little League and helped elderly neighbors with their groceries. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" I sat down across from him, keeping my expression serious, but not threatening. "My name is Mike Stevens. I'm a private investigator." That got his attention. He set down his coffee and gave me his full focus. "I've been conducting surveillance related to a divorce case," I continued. "And I'm afraid your wife's name has come up in connection with some compromising situations." The color drained from David's face. "What kind of situations?" I slid the envelope across the table. "Photos and phone records." "I'm really sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your wife has been helping facilitate an extramarital affair. She's been providing her home as a meeting place and lying to cover up the relationship." David's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Inside were carefully selected printouts, text messages between Rachel and Sam discussing meeting times and alibis, photos I'd taken of Rachel's car at the motel where Sam met Tuck, time-stamped records showing Rachel's phone in suspicious locations, during times she'd claimed to be working. "I don't understand," David whispered. "Rachel would never—" "I'm afraid she would. The evidence is all there." He stared at the photos for a long time. Who is she having an affair with?" "She's not having the affair herself. She's helping her friend Samantha Kane cover up an affair with a man named Travis Tucker. Your wife has been lying to you for months, Mr. Morrison, using your home, your trust, your marriage as cover for someone else's betrayal." The devastation on his face was complete. Not just betrayal, but the particularly cutting realization that his wife had valued someone else's happiness over his trust. "What should I do?" he asked. I leaned forward, projecting sympathy and authority. "That's up to you. But if I were in your position, I'd want some answers. Real answers, not more lies." I left him sitting there with the evidence scattered across the table, staring at the ruins of his marriage. By noon, David Morrison was sitting in his lawyer's office. By 3 p.m., Rachel was receiving divorce papers. By evening, Sam was getting frantic calls from her best friend, who was suddenly dealing with her own marital crisis and couldn't provide emotional support for anyone else's problems. "David hired a lawyer," Rachel texted Sam. "He knows about us covering for you. I'm so sorry, but I can't help anymore. I have to focus on saving my marriage." Sam stared at her phone in our kitchen, her face a mask of confusion and growing panic. Another pillar of support had just crumbled beneath her. "Bad news?" I asked, looking up from my newspaper. "Just friend drama, nothing important." But it was important. Because Rachel had been more than just an accomplice. She'd been Sam's confidant, the person who'd helped her rationalize her choices and plan for her future with Tuck. Without Rachel's support, Sam was emotionally isolated, cut off from the network that had enabled her betrayal. And I was just getting started. That night, Sam tried calling Tuck again. Still no answer. She left another voicemail. "I need you." "Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do. Please call me back." But Tuck was never going to call back. Because according to official military records, Travis Tucker had died 3 weeks ago in a Middle Eastern desert, another casualty of a war that consumed good men and spit out their bones. The only person who knew different was lying in bed beside his widow, planning her complete destruction. The anonymous tip to Millbrook Elementary School Board was a masterpiece of bureaucratic warfare. I'd crafted it carefully, using an untraceable email account and language that sounded like a concerned parent rather than a vengeful husband. The subject line was simple: inappropriate conduct by staff member. The email included carefully selected screenshots of Sam's text messages with Tuck, intimate conversations that clearly showed a sexual relationship time-stamped during school hours, when Sam should have been teaching. Nothing explicitly X-rated, but graphic enough to violate the school's morality clause and professional conduct standards. I also included her work schedule alongside the timestamps of their meetings, proving she'd been lying about faculty meetings and using sick days to conduct her affair. The school board received the email on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Sam was sitting in Principal Henderson's office trying to explain why she'd violated district policy. By Thursday, she was suspended pending a full investigation. I don't understand how this happened, she told me that evening, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. Someone sent private text messages to the school board, personal messages that no one should have had access to. I looked up from my beer with practiced concern. What kind of messages? Just personal stuff. Between me and... She caught herself before saying Tuck's name. Between me and a friend. Must have been pretty bad to get you suspended. She stopped pacing and stared at me. For a moment, I thought she might confess everything. Tell me about Tuck, about the affair, about the lies she'd been telling for months. It would have been the smart play, throw herself on my mercy and hope for forgiveness. Instead, she doubled down on deception. It's not what it looks like. Someone's trying to sabotage me, make it seem like I was having an inappropriate relationship. But it's all taken out of context. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost admired her commitment to the fiction. Almost. Who would want to sabotage you? I don't know. Maybe a parent who's upset about their kid's grades or another teacher who wants my position? You know how petty people can be. Right. Petty. Sam spent the next week in a state of barely controlled panic. Her job was in jeopardy, her best friend wouldn't talk to her, and the man she'd risked everything for had vanished without explanation. She'd call in sick to imaginary appointments, then spend hours driving around town looking for signs of Tuck, checking his old apartment, visiting places they'd been together. She never found him, of course, because the man she was looking for existed only in her memories now. But her searches didn't go unnoticed. Will Patterson, our neighbor and a sergeant with the local police department, mentioned it to me while we were both checking our mail one evening. Saw Sam driving around the Riverside Motel area yesterday, he said casually. Thought maybe you two were looking at it for guests or something. Guests? You know, when your folks visit. That place is pretty cheap. Might be good for overnight stays. I played dumb. Sam didn't mention anything about a motel. Maybe she was meeting a friend for lunch nearby. Maybe. Will's cop instincts were clearly pinging, but he was too polite to pry further. Just seemed odd, you know? She was sitting in the parking lot for about 20 minutes, just looking around. I'll ask her about it. But I didn't need to ask. I knew exactly why Sam had been sitting in that parking lot, staring at the motel where she'd spent so many Tuesday afternoons and Saturday mornings with my best friend. She was trying to make sense of his disappearance, maybe hoping he'd show up for one last goodbye. Hope was a cruel thing to cling to. That same week, I escalated the financial pressure. Sam had always handled our household banking, a responsibility I'd gladly delegated during my military deployments. She paid bills, managed our savings, handled the mortgage and insurance payments. It was a system that worked perfectly when I trusted her. Now it became a weapon. Using my legal authority as joint account holder, I quietly transferred our savings to a new account Sam couldn't access. Then I reported her debit card as stolen and had it canceled. When she tried to pay for groceries that weekend, the card was declined. There's something wrong with our account, she told me that evening, her voice tight with stress. My card isn't working and I can't log into online banking. That's weird. Let me check with the bank tomorrow. Of course, when I called the bank, I already knew exactly what they'd tell me. Some suspicious activity had been detected on the account, requiring enhanced security measures. Nothing that couldn't be resolved, but it would take several days to verify all the paperwork. Several days during which Sam would have no access to our money. They said it's just a security hold, I reported back. Should be cleared up by next week. But next week brought new problems. The bank needed additional documentation. There were forms to fill out, verification procedures to complete, bureaucratic delays that stretched from days into weeks. Sam was forced to borrow money from her sister just to buy groceries. The woman who'd been planning to leave me for another man was now financially dependent on my goodwill and patience. The irony was delicious. "This is insane," she said one evening, waving a stack of bank forms. "It's our money." "Why is this so complicated?" "Banking regulations," I said with a shrug. "Post 9/11 security measures, you know how it is." But Sam was smart enough to sense something wasn't right. I could see it in the way she watched me sometimes, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. The coincidences were piling up. Her job troubles, Rachel's divorce, the bank problems, Tuck's disappearance. To someone not consumed by guilt and panic, it might have looked like a coordinated attack. Fortunately for me, Sam was very consumed by guilt and panic. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in April. I'd been monitoring Sam's phone calls and knew she'd finally worked up the courage to contact the military base directly, claiming to be a family friend concerned about Tuck's welfare. The conversation with the duty officer had lasted exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds. She came home that evening looking like she'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, she had. "Ethan," she said, finding me in the living room, "I need to tell you something." My pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she'd finally break. "What's wrong?" I asked, muting the TV. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling. "I heard something today. About Tuck." "Tuck? What about him?" "He's—" She swallowed hard. "He's missing. Missing in action. They think he might be dead." I let the shock register on my face slowly, like a man processing terrible news for the first time. "What? When did this happen?" 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. There was some kind of mission and he just disappeared. Jesus. I rubbed my forehead, playing the role of grieving friend. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "It's classified. I only found out because I—" She stopped herself. "Because you what?" Sam stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the war raging behind her eyes. Truth versus deception. Confession versus continued lies. Deception won. "Because I called the base to ask about reunion planning," she said. "You know how I always organize those things for the squad families?" Another lie, delivered with the same smooth confidence as all the others. Even with her world collapsing around her, even with the man she'd betrayed me for possibly dead, she still couldn't bring herself to tell me the truth. "Poor Tuck," I said quietly. "He was a good man." "Yeah, he was—" The conversation died there, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Sam was mourning her lost love while trying to hide her grief from the husband she'd betrayed. I was marveling at her commitment to deception even in the face of genuine tragedy. We were both acting, but only one of us knew it was a performance. That night, Sam cried herself to sleep. I listened to her muffled sobs and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She was finally experiencing a fraction of the pain she'd caused me, the betrayal and loss, and helpless anger. But this was still just the appetizer. The main course was yet to come. The surveillance footage was grainy but unmistakable. I'd been monitoring the security cameras at various locations around town for weeks, using contacts from my military intelligence background to access feeds that weren't quite public record. Most of it was routine. Sam driving to work, going to the grocery store, meeting her sister for coffee. But yesterday's footage from the Riverside Motel parking lot was different. At 3:47 p.m., a man in a baseball cap and dark jacket had walked past camera 7, heading toward the rear entrance of the motel. The angle was wrong for a clear facial shot, but his build, his gait, the way he carried his left shoulder slightly higher than his right, it was all familiar. Too familiar. I enhanced the image using software I'd acquired through less than official channels. The face was still unclear, but other details emerged. A small scar on the man's left hand, visible as he reached for the door handle. A distinctive way of favoring his right leg, the result of an old training injury. Details only someone who'd served alongside Travis Tucker would recognize. My blood turned to ice water. Tuck was alive. The realization hit me like a freight train, destroying 3 weeks of careful planning in an instant. He wasn't dead in a Middle Eastern desert. He wasn't buried in some unmarked grave or rotting in an enemy prison. He was here in my town, probably trying to reconnect with my wife. The son of a witch had survived. I spent the next 6 hours reviewing every piece of surveillance footage I could access, tracing the mystery man's movements through downtown Millbrook. He'd been careful, always keeping his head down, avoiding main thoroughfares, sticking to blind spots where possible. But careful wasn't perfect. At 4:23 p.m., he'd stopped at a payphone outside the old hardware store. The call lasted 90 seconds. At 4:55 p.m., he'd purchased a prepaid cell phone from a convenience store, paying cash and keeping his face turned away from the security camera. At 6:12 p.m., he'd disappeared into the wooded area behind Riverside Park. Professional tradecraft. The kind of surveillance avoidance techniques we'd learned in special operations training, the kind Tuck would know by heart. But if Tuck was alive, why hadn't he contacted Sam? Why the elaborate disappearing act? And how the hell had he survived being abandoned in a Middle Eastern ghost town with no identification, no transportation, and no backup? Unless... The possibility hit me like a physical blow. What if Tuck hadn't been abandoned at all? What if he'd planned his own disappearance, using me as an unwitting accomplice? What if the whole mission had been a setup from the beginning? My mind raced through the possibilities. Tuck could have made contact with local insurgents before our operation, arranged for extraction in exchange for intelligence. He could have been planning to fake his passing and disappear with Sam, starting a new life somewhere far from military justice and angry husbands. The fool had played me. But if that was his game, he'd made one critical mistake. He'd come back to Millbrook, back to my territory, where I had every advantage. Time to remind him why that was a bad idea. I spent the rest of the night preparing. Military gear retrieved from storage, weapons cleaned and loaded, surveillance equipment tested and positioned. If Tuck wanted to play ghost, I'd show him what a real phantom looked like. The hunt was on. The burner phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I'd been awake for 6 hours, monitoring police scanners and traffic cameras, waiting for any sign of movement from the wooded area behind Riverside Park. The call display showed the number I'd been expecting, the prepaid phone Tuck had purchased that afternoon. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello? Hello, Ethan. The voice was unmistakably his. That Kentucky drawl I'd listened to for 8 years of deployments and training exercises. Surprised to hear from me? You could say that. Most dead men don't make phone calls. He chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. Yeah, well, reports of my passing have been greatly exaggerated, apparently. Want to tell me how you survived a 100-mile walk through hostile territory with no ID and no backup? Maybe we should discuss that in person. You free tomorrow night? The audacity was breathtaking. You want to meet? After what you did? After what I did? His voice hardened. Brother, you left me to die in that desert. Disabled my radio, fed false coordinates to base, planted evidence to make me look like a deserter. You really think I don't know what you did? My throat went dry. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he'd figured out my plan. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know about your wife's bank accounts being frozen, or her job troubles, or that anonymous tip to the school board. Real professional work, Ethan. Almost like you learned it from someone who taught intelligence gathering. The phone felt slippery in my hand. If you know all that, why are you calling? Because we need to settle this, man to man. No more games, no more psychological warfare. Just you and me, working out our differences like soldiers. And if I refuse? Then I start talking to people. The real story about what happened in Levant. About how a decorated special forces operator tried to homicide his best friend over a woman. About how that same operator has been systematically destroying his wife's life for weeks. The threat was clear. Mutually assured destruction. We both had enough dirt to bury each other. Where do you want to meet? Old Lumber Mill, Route 34. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Come alone. The line went dead. I sat in my darkened office, staring at the phone and trying to process what had just happened. Tuck was alive. He knew what I'd done, and he was calling the shots. 3 weeks of careful planning had just evaporated like morning mist. But maybe that wasn't entirely bad news, because psychological warfare was subtle, complex, and ultimately unsatisfying. What Tuck was proposing was much simpler. 2 soldiers settling their differences in the most direct way possible. Violence, I understood. Violence had rules, objectives, clear winners and losers. Violence I could work with. The next evening, I prepared for war. Combat gear went into a duffel bag, tactical vest, night vision goggles, zip ties, first aid kit. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. My service pistol, a combat knife, and a civilian hunting rifle with a scope that could put a bullet through a quarter at 300 yards. I also packed a small device that would scramble any recording equipment Tuck might bring. This conversation was going to stay between us. The drive to the lumber mill took 40 minutes through winding country roads. I arrived early and spent 20 minutes surveying the area through my rifle scope. The mill had been abandoned for 15 years, its skeletal framework rising against the night sky like the bones of some massive beast. Perfect place for a private conversation. Tuck's truck was already there, parked behind the main building. I could see him silhouetted against one of the broken windows, waiting with the patience of a professional soldier. I parked 100 yards away and approached on foot, moving through the shadows with practiced stealth. He'd chosen the meeting spot well. Multiple escape routes, good sight lines, plenty of cover. But I knew the terrain, too. Had hunted these woods as a teenager. That's close enough, Tuck called when I was 50 feet away. I stopped and stepped into the moonlight, hands visible but ready to move. He was standing on a loading dock, dressed in civilian clothes but wearing military-issued boots. His face was harder than I remembered, weathered by whatever he'd experienced over the past month. "You look good for a dead man," I said. Levant was educational. Nothing like a long walk through hostile territory to give you perspective on life. "How'd you manage it?" He smiled without humor. "Turns out being abandoned by your best friend is excellent motivation for survival. Also turns out that some of those insurgents you were so worried about are actually pretty reasonable people once you explain that you're not the enemy. So you did defect." "I did what I had to do to stay alive. Just like you did what you thought you had to do to destroy my life." We stared at each other across the loading dock. Two men who'd once been brothers, now enemies in everything but crimson red. "Why didn't you contact Sam?" I asked. "Because I wanted to see what you'd do first, wanted to understand exactly what kind of man I'd been calling friend for 8 years. His voice turned cold. "Turns out you're the kind who'd rather commit homicide than have an honest conversation with his wife. And you're the kind who'd rather screw his friend's wife than find his own." Fair point. The admission caught me off guard. I'd expected denials, justifications, excuses, not simple acknowledgement. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we settle this. But first, I want you to know something. Sam tried to end it. 3 weeks before you came back from deployment, she told me it was over. Said she couldn't keep lying to you, couldn't keep betraying her marriage." The words hit me like physical blows. "You're lying. Check her phone records from March 15th. She called me 7 times that day, begging me to understand. Told me she loved you, that what we had was just confusion, loneliness. She was going to confess everything when you got home, ask for forgiveness." My head was spinning. "Then why didn't she?" "Because you came back acting like the perfect husband, loving, attentive, planning romantic weekends. She couldn't bring herself to destroy that happiness with her confession. So she decided to just let it die. Let us die. But she kept texting you. I saw the messages. She was trying to say goodbye properly, to explain why she was choosing you over me. The woman you've been torturing for weeks was actually trying to save your marriage." The truth hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Everything I'd done, every carefully planned act of revenge, had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Sam hadn't been planning to leave me. She'd been planning to stay, and I'd destroyed her life for it. "You're lying," I repeated, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "Am I? Then why haven't you found any evidence of her planning to leave you? No secret bank accounts, no apartment rentals, no job applications in other cities. All you found was a woman who made a mistake and was trying to fix it." The loading dock seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what you've really done here. You didn't punish an unfaithful wife. You destroyed an innocent woman who was trying to choose you." Rage exploded in my chest. At Tuck, at Sam, at myself. "She wasn't innocent. She betrayed our marriage. And she was ending the betrayal. She chose you, Ethan. She chose you, and you turned that choice into a weapon to destroy her life." I reached for my sidearm, but Tuck was faster. His pistol appeared in his hand like magic, trained on my center mass. "I wouldn't," he said calmly. We stood there in the moonlight, 2 armed men with 8 years of shared history and a month of mutual hatred between us. "So what's your plan?" I asked. "Eliminate me and ride off into the sunset with my wife?" "My plan is to give you a choice. Same choice you should have given Sam when you found out about us." "What choice?" "You can walk away. Tonight. Disappear like you tried to make me disappear. Let Sam rebuild her life without your psychological torture. Let her find some peace. And if I don't, then I go to the police. Tell them everything. About Levant, about what you've been doing to Sam, about this conversation. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison for attempted homicide and domestic terrorism. They'll never believe you. Maybe not. But they'll investigate. And when they do, they'll find all the evidence you've been so careful to create. The financial manipulation, the forged documents, the surveillance equipment in your house. It's all there, Ethan. You documented your own crimes. He was right. In my obsession with destroying Sam's life, I'd created a paper trail that would damn me in any court of law. There's a third option, I said. What's that? We finish this right here, right now. One of us walks away, one of us doesn't. Tuck considered this for a long moment. You really want to go down that road? You destroyed my marriage. I destroyed your life. Seems like we're about even. Your marriage was already broken, Ethan. We just showed you the cracks. Bees. Is it? When's the last time you and Sam had a real conversation? When's the last time you told her you loved her and meant it? When's the last time you made her feel like she was worth more than your military career? Each question was a knife twist because I knew the answers. Our marriage had been dying long before Tuck entered the picture, suffocated by deployment schedules and emotional distance and my stubborn refusal to let anyone get too close. But admitting that would mean admitting I was the villain in this story. She made her choice, I said. Yeah, she chose you. And look how that worked out for her. The loading dock fell silent except for the wind through the broken windows. Two butchers in the moonlight, each waiting for the other to make the final move. But the move, when it came, wasn't what either of us expected. The sound of approaching sirens shattered the night. Tuck and I both tensed, weapons still trained on each other, as red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Multiple vehicles coming fast. You called the cops? I asked. Hell no. Did you? The sirens were getting closer. In less than 2 minutes, this place would be swarming with law enforcement. Someone knew about this meeting, Tuck said, lowering his weapon slightly. Not from me. We stared at each other, and I saw my own realization reflected in his eyes. There was only one person who could have known where we'd be tonight, only one person with access to both our communications. Sam. She's been playing us, I whispered. Both of us. The first police cruiser rounded the bend, followed by 2 more. Floodlights cut through the darkness, turning the abandoned mill into a stage set. A voice boomed through a megaphone. This is the Millbrook Police Department. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and place your hands on your head. Tuck and I looked at each other one more time, 8 years of brotherhood and 1 month of hatred passing between us in a single glance. Then we both dropped our tools and raised our hands. The next hour was a blur of handcuffs, Miranda rights, and very pointed questions from Detective Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who clearly knew more about our situation than she was letting on. Interesting story, gentlemen, she said, reviewing our statements in the interrogation room. 2 decorated soldiers, best friends for 8 years, trying to eliminate each other over a woman. Very Greek tragedy. We weren't trying to eliminate anyone, Tuck said. Right. You were just having a friendly chat with loaded weapons in an abandoned building at midnight. Happens all the time. I'd been in enough interrogations to know when the police had more cards than they were showing. What did Sam tell you? Monroe smiled. Mrs. Kane has been very helpful. She came to us 3 days ago with quite a story. About psychological warfare, financial manipulation, forged documents, surveillance equipment, very detailed accusations. My blood turned to ice. She's lying, is she? Because we got a warrant for your house this morning, Mr. Kane. Amazing what we found in your office. Cell phone cloning equipment, financial documents showing fraudulent transfers, even a computer full of forged military correspondence. The walls were closing in fast. Those aren't illegal. Maybe not individually, but taken together, they paint a picture of systematic stalking and maltreatment. Add in the attempted homicide charge from Levant. What attempted homicide charge? Monroe consulted her notes. According to military records, Staff Sergeant Tucker here was abandoned during a classified operation after his communications equipment was sabotaged. The Army's Criminal Investigation Division is very interested in talking to you about that. I looked at Tuck, who was staring at the table. You reported it. I had to. When I figured out what you'd done to Sam, I realized you were capable of anything. I couldn't let you keep destroying people. So you went to the police. We went to the police, Monroe corrected. Together. Your wife and your best friend, united in their concern for public safety. Quite touching, really. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Sam figured out what I was doing, she'd recruited my own target to help bring me down. While I'd been playing psychological games, she'd been building a legal case against me. I want a lawyer, I said. Smart choice. You're going to need one. As Monroe left the room, I turned to Tuck. How long have you been working with her? Since the night you called. She'd been suspicious for weeks, but hearing from me confirmed everything. We spent the last 3 days gathering evidence. Evidence of what? He looked at me with something that might have been pity. Evidence that you're not the man I thought you were. Evidence that 8 years of friendship don't mean much when your pride gets wounded. And what about 8 years of marriage? Did that mean anything to Sam? More than you deserved, apparently. The door opened and my lawyer arrived, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As he reviewed the charges against me, the scope of my situation became clear. Attempted homicide in a foreign theater of operations, domestic stalking and maltreatment, financial fraud, illegal surveillance, conspiracy to commit identity theft, 25 to life if they could make it all stick. And from the evidence Montgomery had described, they probably could. There might be a deal available, the lawyer said quietly. Cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of cooperation? Full confession. Details about how you conducted your operation, what military resources you used, who else might have been involved. I thought about Sam, probably sitting in another room giving her own statement, describing months of psychological torture inflicted by the man who'd sworn to love and protect her, painting herself as the sufferer of a calculating hunter, which, I was beginning to realize, might actually be true. I need time to think. You don't have much time. The military wants to extradite you for the Levant incident. If they get you first, this becomes a courts-martial situation. Military justice is less forgiving than civilian courts. Less forgiving. That was one way to put it. Military courts didn't have much sympathy for soldiers who endangered their brothers in arms. Through the interrogation room window, I could see Tuck being released. No charges filed, apparently. He shook hands with Detective Monroe and walked out into the night, a free man, while I sat in handcuffs, facing the rest of my life in prison. The final irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to destroy Sam's life, I'd given her exactly what she needed to destroy mine. Every piece of evidence I'd carefully created to prove her guilt had become evidence of my own crimes. She'd played the long game better than I had. And now, she was about to win. The courtroom was packed for my sentencing hearing. 3 months had passed since my arrest at the lumber mill. 3 months of plea negotiations, psychiatric evaluations, and increasingly dire legal advice. In the end, I'd taken the deal, full confession in exchange for concurrent sentences that would put me away for 15 years instead of life. Sam sat in the front row, looking nothing like the broken woman I'd tried to create. Her hair was shorter, more professional. She wore a navy blue suit and carried herself with quiet confidence. The woman who'd been suspended from her teaching job had somehow landed a position with the county prosecutor's office, helping other sufferers of domestic misuse navigate the legal system. Apparently, surviving psychological warfare made for impressive credentials. Tuck wasn't there. He'd testified during the plea hearings, then vanished back into whatever new life he was building. I'd heard he was working private security somewhere down south, but I didn't really care anymore. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Walsh, reviewed my file with obvious distaste. Mr. Kane, she said, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated campaign of psychological misuse. You used military training and resources to systematically destroy the life of a woman who trusted you. You endangered a fellow soldier out of petty jealousy. You manipulated legal and financial systems for personal revenge. I stood at attention, saying nothing. There was nothing to say. The prosecution has described your actions as domestic terrorism, and I'm inclined to agree. You weaponized your wife's love and trust against her, turning her own home into a battlefield where she was fighting an enemy she couldn't see. Sam was crying quietly in the front row. Not for me, I realized. For the man she'd thought I was, the husband she'd tried to save by ending her affair. That man was gone, replaced by the hollow shell standing before the court. However, Judge Walsh continued, I'm also aware that your military service included multiple deployments and exposure to combat trauma. While this doesn't excuse your actions, it does provide context for the psychological deterioration that led to these crimes. Combat trauma, PTSD, the defense my lawyer had built around my actions, turning me from hunter into sufferer. It wasn't wrong exactly, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was simpler and uglier. I'd been a fool long before combat broke me. The war had just given me better tools for expressing it. Therefore, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. You will also be required to undergo psychological counseling and will be prohibited from any contact with the sufferer upon your release. The gavel fell with finality. As the bailiffs led me away in shackles, I caught Sam's eye one last time. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just watching, her face a mask of quiet sadness. Not for what I'd become, I realized, for what I'd always been, underneath the uniform and the medals and the carefully constructed image of honor. A small, petty man who'd rather destroy than forgive. 5 years into my sentence, I received a letter. The return address was local, Millbrook, Kentucky, but the handwriting wasn't Sam's. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Dear Ethan, I hope this letter finds you well. I know we didn't part on good terms, but I wanted you to know that Sam and I got married last month. Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony with her family. I thought you should hear it from me rather than through prison gossip or old mutual friends. I know it probably doesn't matter to you anymore, but I wanted you to know that we're happy, really happy. Sam's doing well. She finished her law degree and works for a sufferers advocacy group now. She helps people who've been through what she went through. She's good at it. Maybe because she understands what it feels like to have someone you trust turn against you. I'm not writing this to hurt you. I'm writing because I think you deserve to know that she's okay, that she survived what you did to her and built something better on the other side of it. I hope someday you can find that kind of peace too. Take care of yourself. Tuck. I read the letter 3 times, then tore it into small pieces and flushed them down the toilet. Through my cell window, I could see the Kentucky hills in the distance, rolling green under a summer sky. Somewhere out there, Sam was building a new life with the man she'd chosen, helping other sufferers, using her experience to heal instead of damage. While I sat in a concrete box, counting days until parole, and wondering if there was anything left of the man I used to be. The answer, I suspected, was no, but maybe that was okay. Maybe some things couldn't be redeemed, only replaced. Maybe some people didn't deserve second chances. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, dreaming of Middle Eastern deserts and abandoned schools and the sound of my wife crying in the darkness while I planned her destruction. Even in dreams, I couldn't escape what I'd become.